I think we've reached a point with Disney where most people recognize their works are soulless, corporate. No, those terms are synonymous. By the end of Ahsoka, I had thought this series fit that mold as well. But while I was writing the first drafts of my review, I came to a different conclusion. One that I'm not certain is much better. Dave Filoni is too invested in his own creations. I'm sure that sounds confusing to begin with. You think a creator having an investment in their work would inevitably lead to at least a decent product, right? Typically, that would be correct. However, that is not always the case. Let me explain. There are many problems with the series Ahsoka. But when I look at the characters, I can't help but think Filoni really doesn't want anything bad to happen to them. He doesn't want them to suffer potentially serious repercussions, almost like how a good parent doesn't want to see their kids suffer. Never mind the fact that adversity and suffering is how people, and thus characters, grow and mature as individuals. The characters are obviously what drives a plot forward, so a problem with them is like driving down a curvy, bumpy road with two missing tires. What I'm saying is you aren't driving anywhere. I think you can accurately describe a story's plot as a series of adverse situations the characters are forced to deal with. Now, these situations can be minor or major in scope, but the end result should always be that something changes. Ahsoka is a flat character, in this series specifically, and this is disappointing because you can tell that Filoni attempted to give her an arc. The arc begins at the end of episode 4 and concludes at episode 5. Which is strange, considering it's an 8-episode series. The concept of it is that Ahsoka is the same as Anakin was. Emotional, dangerous, and powerful. She is someone that leaves death and destruction in her wake wherever she walks.
Ahsoka, within you will be everything I am, all the knowledge I possess, just as I inherited knowledge from my master, and he from his. You are part of a legacy.
But my part of that legacy is one of death and war.
But you're more than that. Because I'm more than that.
You are more, Anakin, but more powerful and dangerous than anyone realized.
Is that what this is about?
If I am everything you are...
You've learned nothing.
Don't say that.
Back to the beginning.
The Force Ghost hologram of Anakin repeatedly tells her she must
Live or die.
Until she defeats him in combat and wakes up as an enlightened Jedi. Ahsoka the White. I see what Filoni's gunning for, but none of it makes sense. Every single time that Ahsoka is shown, she is doing something for the good of the galaxy. She's hunting witches, saving young Force users, or otherwise being a positive presence.
Nice haircut.
If you wanted to talk about there being a legacy of death behind her like with Anakin, then we need to see it. The only time I could see this arc working was at the end of the Clone Wars.
Why are you doing this?
The Council didn't trust me. So how can I trust myself?
Or Rebels, where she seems more conflicted with life in general.
Ahsoka.
Anakin. I won't leave you. Not this time.
There is no setup for the arc, even outside of the series, and thus the payoff, if you want to call it that, completely falls flat on its face.
You're certain they know where Sabine was taken?
I have no idea.
What?
No idea. We'll just see where it goes.
It could go anywhere.
I know. That's better than going nowhere.
Having a flat character is not a bad thing in and of itself, but they need to serve a purpose. They are usually best utilized by changing or challenging other characters that have arcs to complete. But since Ahsoka is not conceptualized as a flat character from the start, she isn't written to act like one and perform that duty. The result is a walking plank of wood that smirks, occasionally folds her arms, and acts stoic in battle. She has no real consequence outside of retrieving the map in the first place. But you know who this really hurts?
Sabine Wren. Find her now.
Sabine Wren. This woman is tragic, and not engagingly good tragic. but frustratingly tragic. She has all the makings for a wonderful arc that stems from her selfishness and loneliness, only for the entire show to write off every single bad decision she makes. Seriously, everything she does somehow works out for the best. Oh, you stole the map from Ahsoka and then fumbled it into enemy hands. Don't worry, they left a droid with critical information behind, so we have a lead to find them. Oh, you got stabbed in the gut because you took on a trained Force user in lightsaber combat. Don't worry, our medical tech is so good that you'll be healed by the next morning.
Sometimes even the right reasons have the wrong consequences.
Stop the cap. Stop the cap right now. Stop the cap.
The only growth she gets is in the Force because her personality certainly isn't forced to change. Despite losing the map to the enemy, surrendering it later, and enabling Thrawn to make it back to the main galaxy, it all just works out.
We're almost packed.
Did well.
Did I? Thrawn got away.
And thanks to you, Ezra got home. Ezra is where he needs to be. And so are we.
She isn't maimed at any point, no character berates her for her choices, and at the end of the day, even though her failure leads to her and Ahsoka being stranded in a completely separate galaxy, it is exactly where they need to be. Let's just forget the fact that everyone in context treats Thrawn like he'd be Armageddon for the Star Wars universe.
Yes, but I believe their activity speaks to a larger operation.
It always does.
Involving Thrawn.
Grand Admiral Thrawn? But how is that possible? He disappeared years ago.
She literally doomed them all. Yet all Ahsoka has to say is, I understand.
You must be pleased. More relieved than anything else.
Your gamble paid off.
So you know. Never thought I'd see him again.
You might not have, had you chosen differently.
I'm sorry.
No.
You're not mad?
Over the years, I've made my share of difficult choices. Often no one understood my reasons, except my master. He always stood by me.
She mentions that Anakin stood by her when she made questionable decisions, but Sabine's choices are objectively bad. She isn't even forced to reveal to Ezra that she completely invalidated his sacrifice in Rebels. And speaking of Rebels, Hera is here as well. She does basically nothing. No, let me stop. That's not correct. Hera hesitates to help Sabine and Ahsoka long enough to not be of use to them, but also short enough to still get 2 of her men killed. She also gets out with no repercussions because Leia is down with it. Whether it makes sense or not, it is another example of Filoni getting his characters out of some natural consequence. Then we have Ezra Bridger. I'll be honest, if you hadn't seen Rebels, then there is zero reason to care about him. Despite having the second most amount of potential for an engaging plotline, if you take Rebels into account, Ezra acts like a happy-go-lucky stoner. There's no wear and tear from being stranded for a decade or worried that his sacrifice was now jeopardized since Sabine suddenly appeared.
Knew I could count on you. Sure took you long enough.
Well, you didn't exactly tell any of us where you were going.
That's because I didn't know where I was going.
Always a plan. Never a good one.
Hey, it worked, didn't it? Didn't it?
It worked.
Remember in episode 1 that he tells Sabine to move on in his recording for her.
Hey, Sabine. As a Jedi, sometimes you have to make the decision no one else can. So that's what I did to defeat Thrawn. I know your fight isn't over, and now I won't be there to help you, but I'm counting on you to see this through. May the Force be with you.
I know that once Sabine handed the map to Lord Balin, her inevitable confrontation with Ezra was all I was looking forward to too. Actually, this is probably the biggest disappointment of the show for me. It's the one thing that was legitimately well set up. And Filoni just dropped the ball because Sabine's fifis would have gotten hurt. At this point, you might ask, well, what about the villains? Were they interesting at the least? Dear viewer, I am here to inform you that no, they are not. If we take a look at the 4 antagonists, Thrawn, Morgan Elsbeth, Balin Skull, and Shin, none of them really talk about anything interesting. I can barely remember the last girl's name, she does so little. They ultimately suffer from the same issue that the protagonists face, but as a byproduct. You see, because Filoni has the heroes dodge consequences so well, the villains are left to be either incompetent or otherwise completely ineffectual. And that's without looking at what they bring to the table with their own personalities. Ranking them from worst to best, I'd say that Shin is the least engaging, followed by Elsbeth, then Thrawn, surprising, I know, and finally Balin's Skull. Shin spends the entire series in some type of narrative wormhole. There's potential for her growth, which may be expanded upon in the next season, but I'm not judging based on hypotheticals I don't even think the writers can follow through on. Shin is directed by Balin, and at no point does she take her own direction or show much personality.
Do you know the one she seeks so desperately?
Bridget? No. Comes from a breed of Boken Jedi trained in the wild.
Like me?
No. You. I trained to be something more.
The only memorable moment I have is of her attempt to kill Sabine the second time they fought because she's ticked off. Outside of that, it's just, "Oh, Master, what should we do?" And, "Oh, Master, what does that mean?" She's more of a vehicle for Balin to wax poetic if you ask me. Points to her for attempting to finish Sabine off in their first encounter though. And Morgan? What the hell does she even do here? Actually, now that I've thought about it, she doesn't have any real character development either. I put her on the same level as Shin, with her only saving grace being that her final fight with Ahsoka was decent. From her side, at least. The actor did pretty well with the choreography and it ended her contribution in a positive light. Then we have Thrawn. I originally went back and forth on who I'd put at the top of the villain list, but decided Thrawn is lower than Balin for one reason: effectiveness. On a surface level, Thrawn has a lot of personality and comes off as a guy with plans that have plans. He is unfortunately kneecapped by Filoni's execution, like everything else. Ezra lived, despite outnumbering him an entire starship filled with troopers to one. He isn't even aware where Ezra is, even though they've been on the same planet for 10 years.
It's also quite possible that your friend is dead.
If you survived, I'm sure he's doing just fine.
You've gambled the fate of your galaxy on that belief.
Red Admiral, we received a signal pinpointing Bridger's location.
Dispatch 2 gunships to assist the mercenaries.
Thrawn also had nothing better to do? It just comes off as incompetent for him to not remove an obvious obstacle with such a superior standing. Then, he didn't build anything in the meantime? No resource gathering and preparation to go back to the important galaxy? At least have everything packed so that when your saviors arrive, you can just leave. Why was there so much outside of the ship?
Soon we shall all escape this exile thanks to the efforts of Morgan and Elspeth. This is Enoch, captain of my guard. He shall begin the cargo transfer as per my agreement with the Great Mothers.
I have seen the catacombs. It will take at least 3 rotations.
An acceptable time frame.
Those two things aren't dwelled upon in the show, so if no one thought about them, I wouldn't be surprised. In that case, look at what he does in the present. First, he sends Balin and Shin out to destroy Ezra and Sabine along with some of his soldiers. Smart choice to make. So why, when this fails, does he not send multiple TIE fighters out to clean them up? He's satisfied with Ahsoka just losing time, but a man of his caliber shouldn't be leaving anything to chance, especially since he knows Ahsoka's unpredictability.
Her master was General Anakin Skywalker.
Yes.
Withdraw the fighters and have them stand by.
Why not allow them to follow?
Jedi are very good at hiding. However, we are getting to know our adversary, and if she's anything like her master, she'll be unpredictable and quite dangerous.
Then there's the second time he does attack them with 2 TIE fighters. Not speaking on the choreography of this scene, once they're destroyed, he seems to be fine with the protagonists being out there as long as their ship is damaged. This was something I thought was strange on the first watch. Send out another ship at least, they're sitting ducks now. At least he attempts the bombardment later, and that only fails thanks to plot. I feel for you there, buddy. My issue with Thrawn boils down to him being portrayed as this magnificent threat to the galaxy purely due to his intelligence. So making boneheaded moves like he does in the series proper does not do a good job of portraying said intelligence. It undermines him, if anything. I was left on the final episode only wondering how Ahsoka and Sabine will make it back. Thrawn doesn't come off as a legitimate threat, not to the galaxy as a whole at least. Finally, we have Baylan Skoll, a villain who somewhat thrives here because he's the only one to succeed in whatever he's planning. That's the thing about this guy. Everything he talks about is vague Jedi stuff.
I watched everything I knew burn.
The Jedi Temple?
Couldn't make sense of it at the time. As you get older, look at history, you realize it's all inevitable. Fall of the Jedi, rise of the Empire. It repeats again and again and again.
Won't our alliance with Thrawn finally bring us into power?
That sort of power is fleeting. What I seek is the beginning, so I may finally bring this cycle to an end.
It works, not only because nearly everything in this show is a lost Jedi nonsense, but more importantly, that Baylan manages to get a legitimate win against the protagonist. He waxes poetic, defeats Ahsoka, and then successfully retrieves the map so that they can get Thrawn. Honestly, dude didn't need to do anything else after that for me. He was firmly at the top of the list for being effective. There is also the fact that he does honor his agreement with Sabine, displays regret for having to kill Ahsoka.
It didn't need to come to this, but you know no other way.
And even treats his protege Shin with care and respect. These actions demonstrate he's not just evil Jedi number 27. He has a nuance to his actions like a real person. Funnily enough, I believe the reason Baylan makes it out so cleanly is because his actions ultimately do not harm the main cast. His defeat of Ahsoka is completely fixed in the next episode, and enabling Sabine to reach Ezra serves as a compliment for his own character, leaving him in a good light by the end. It really is too bad Ray Stevenson passed. He was the best part of this series. Rest in peace, man. There's also this guy, who I think was made to sell toys and be fodder so someone could actually die in these lightsaber fights outside of the end. There is so much potential here that just gets squandered. And why? Because Filoni just can't hurt his characters. I hope you enjoyed the video. I had this idea when I realized the pitfalls I witnessed reminded me of some of the first fiction I wrote in high school. Separating yourself from your created characters can be difficult. Moving past the plot, another thing about this show that had me grinding my teeth is the fight choreography. I have discussion videos for some really good video games to make first, but I will be returning to Ahsoka later to dissect how stupid and ineffectual a lot of the fights are. Till next time, stay blessed.